Hello out there, everyone. Today we're talking about Nick Land's book, Fanged Noumena. Noumena. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but instead of having a copy of the book today, I just have this cardboard slab that I've scrolled Fanged Noumena out on, and I'm going to pretend like this is the book for the purposes of reading this, because today we're talking about a book written by a literal fascist, and while I don't say that such work should be burned or banned or whatever, because that's directly out of the fascist playbook, I'm not going to buy them. I read this for free online. It's up on the Internet Archive. You can go read it if you really want to. Do I recommend buying this book from Nick Land or his publisher? No. Fuck no. Don't waste your money on this trash. But I have a cardboard slab that represents Fanged Noumena and a little list of quotes from Fanged Noumena I'm going to dissect for purposes here today. If you're currently wondering why the world seems to be collapsing around you, it can all be traced back to this one book, pretty much, Fanged Noumena by Nick Land. It was written back in the 90s, and it then influenced Mencius Moldbug, aka Curtis Yarvin, who in turn influenced big businessmen and lobbyists like Peter Thiel, who collectively form the neo-fascist reactionary movement known as the Dark Enlightenment, which is complete bullshit because there's nothing enlightening about this book. This book, Fanged Noumena, is really just the ramblings of a meth addict at college. And Nick Land is British. While at college, he wrote this book, which is about a dozen or so essays. I use this term loosely because they're really just meth rants. That's all they are when you get right down to it. But Nick Land has been fed the works of so many influential philosophers like Schopenhauer and Nietzsche and Kant that he stuffs them all together, along with some modern references to movies and books like Neuromancer and The Terminator and stuff like that. So, like I say, Nick Land is an absolute buffoon, piece of shit, dumb fuck, dipshit, 9000 Supremo. And in my recent comic, Sapo vs. Fascism, I actually have Nick Land in there. It's very funny. Nick Land's shirt is like covered in vomit stains, and he's a real schlep. And he says, "Good day, chaps. It's me, Nick Land. I pretend to be an influential academic, but actually, I am more incoherent than 99% of meth addicts, and my brain is more rotten than a 3-month-old soiled condom, glorp." Then he says, "I'm sorry, I just shat myself. I am such a pessimistic nihilist, I do not believe it matters if I use the bathroom or not." Oh, yeah, a very funny comic here. Obviously, what fascist shitheads like Nick Land really hate is if you mock or belittle them, or presume to say that their ideas are stupid, that the ideas they spread are fucking dumb. When I posted this comic online, I got some pushback from, as I would expect, super angry, bitter, coping fascists, coping and seething, who are like, "Oh, you shouldn't make comics about modern fascists like Curtis Yarvin or Nick Land. You should just make comics with Nazis from the 40s, like Hitler and Goebbels." And I'm like, well, that's been done to death. That's a cliche. It's cliche to make a comic where Hitler dies or whatever. That's been done a gazillion times. But what if I made a comic where Nick Land fucking died? Now that's fucking awesome. And that's my new comic, Sapo vs. Fascism. I don't mean to advertise it here, but I'm really proud of it. I'm very proud of what I did with this work. And it's cool to see Curtis Yarvin or Nick Land die in a comic as opposed to Goebbels or any of those. Because I'm not concerned with old-fashioned, timey 1940s fascism. That's been done and it's past, and we're now in neo-fascism. Neo-reactionary, dark enlightenment sort of territory. So if we want to defeat it, we need to tackle modern fascists head-on, like Nick Land. We need to mock, belittle, ridicule them to high heaven, because all of their thought is just based on the ramblings of a fucking meth addict at college. It's a great example of how the modern world that Nick Land and accelerationists like him hate so much really just enables filleting, solipsistic academics like Nick Land to exist in the first place, and he fucking hates it. He just spends all his time taking meth and writing incoherent garbage, and then publishing it and being like, "Look at me, I'm so smart, I know Schopenhauer," and then people buy it, And it's like this, vicious circle. It's this self-perpetuating loop. It is really interesting in a way, because a sheltered British academic like Nick Land, who's never gone outside or interacted with the real world in his fucking life, of course he would hate the modern world, because his only exposure to it is taking meth and going to college. And that sounds like a fucking boring, miserable life. Thankfully, I'm, 20, 30 years younger than Nick Land, and as a fully capable Gen Zer, I'm more than willing to inherit the perturbed, disturbed, wild modern world that shitheads like Nick Land have thrust upon me. I'm here for it. I'm here till the grave. But Nick Land, being the weak little chode he is, can't handle it, so he writes 40,000, 50,000, 100,000 word essays like Fanged Noumena, and he expects us to take it seriously, which you absolutely should not. So let's roast the fuck out of some quotes from Fanged Noumena. So one of these points that Nick Land goes back to time and again is Neuromancer. He doesn't go for a deep cut like Jack Barron or High Rise or Concrete Island or anything like that, Cyberpunk. He just goes for Neuromancer, the most obvious, by-the-numbers, basic bitch choice. I like Neuromancer, for the record. I really like writers like William Gibson, Philip K. Dick, and like that. But what Nick Land seems to take away from Neuromancer is just that it's cool, and when Molly Millions fucks, it's really hot. And this is all he gets out of Neuromancer, and I think that's very sad. So there's an entire chapter about Colonel Kurtz from Heart of Darkness and Wintermute from Neuromancer. He dives into this false dichotomy of masculinity, where you're either Colonel Kurtz and you kill entire villages of women and children for efficiency's sake. Oh, the horror, And then there's Wintermute on the other hand, and Wintermute, kills entire villages of women and children for efficiency's sake, but he's a computer. So these are like the two types of man in Nick Land's eye. Once Colonel Kurtz is extinct, Wintermute takes over. Yes, Kurtz and Wintermute, the two genders. This is not how masculinity works. If you want to understand impotent, insecure, white masculinity, then Fanged Noumena is the book for you. Do I think all white men are insecure and don't know what to do with their lives? No, not by any means, but many don't. And Nick Land is example numero uno of this. So he goes in depth about these Oedipal ideas in the Sphinx and how Molly Millions is hot. She's got the razor fingers. Ooh, stroke those down my back, baby. And it's just like, okay, this is all you get out of Neuromancer, which is a beautiful book, again. Not knocking Neuromancer at all. It's a great book, and it's very influential and exciting, and I love Neuromancer when I read it. But my takeaway isn't at all that just like Molly Millions is hot, or for that matter that any of the stuff described in it is going to happen like word for word. But Nick Land doesn't seem capable of separating fiction from reality, so in his mind there's already an entire satellite full of Rastafarians called Zion, and they're all up there, smoking hash. I don't think so. You'd have to be kind of fucking stupid to interpret everything in Neuromancer literally. I mean, like, the Soviet Union still exists in Neuromancer, obviously. It doesn't exist in our world. So you can't take Neuromancer and go everything in Neuromancer just happens. That's fucking stupid. So then he goes into the Terminator. The Terminator movies feature a biotechnical reconstruct called Arnold Schwarzenegger, wrapped in level after level of artificiality, as a Turing test nightmare retro infiltrated to forestall human resistance to a neo-replicator usurpation. The shamanic material of the films includes time travel, asymmetric visual damage, dismemberment, ambivalence, melting bodies, with Skynet as bird of prey mother. The Oedipal hero, John Connor, is contemporary with his own father. Of course, he reads some kind of weird incest plot into Terminator, even though that's not what actually happens, because Kyle Reese and John Connor are just good friends. They're not brothers or anything, so it's not weird that Kyle Reese is the same age as John Connor or whatever. It's just how time travel works. It's less weird than Back to the Future, even. Nick Land weaves these Oedipal themes in, like, Skynet's a mother or some bullshit. Skynet could just as easily be masculine. I don't think Skynet's given a gender. There's nothing inherently masculine or feminine about it. But Nick Land divides everything up into these false dichotomy terms that really betray how he's just a sci-fi fanboy that can't write a book as good as Neuromancer. So he wants to act like his weird interpretations of these movies that aren't even that deep or thought-provoking. Like, they're not even stuff I haven't heard a million times before. He wants to pretend as if he's saying these hard truths that have never been said before. Oh, what if, like, the Terminator is like an artificial construct? Well, yeah, that's what the Terminator is. When you dissect a movie like this, just on and on and on, ad infinitum, I mean, you can go on about a movie for like an hour or so, and that's healthy. You know, it's healthy to think critically about the media you consume. But then when you go into like, oh, you know, Skynet is this Oedipal mother complex, it's like, no, Skynet is just a computer system. Terminator isn't even like Alien, where there's all this like Oedipal mother symbology baked in. You know, like in Alien, the computer of the Nostromo is called Mother, and that's obviously like a you know, gender type thing. But Skynet isn't. I've never even heard anyone say Skynet is like gendered or is a mother or whatever. So this is just really stupid. Then we get to the really juicy shit where Nick Land just outright talks about fascism and how it's like right or whatever. But Tale also has the peculiar honour, again British, just like Oswald Mosley, shared with Nietzsche and Reich, of beginning his assault on German National Socialism before Hitler had exhibited its truth. His early essays sketch a vision of fascism as the most fanatical project of, or the elimination of excess, an attempt at the secular enforcement of the perfectly ordered city of God against the disorder, luxuriance, and mess of surplus production as it sprawls into the voluptuary expenditure of eroticism in art. Assailing the fascist tendency is the disindividualized delirium of tragic sacrifice and revolution. Nick Land just comes out right here and says it, that fascism, I forget the exact quote, again I just have this list of little spark notes. I did read the entire thing, but it wasn't an easy task at all. So Nick Land writes about like how fascism is the end result of philosophy, because philosophy's goal is to like order everything and categorize it into neat little boxes. But if that's the case, Nick Land, why the fuck are you a philosopher? The disjointed ramblings of a meth addict can be very interesting if they're branded as such and acknowledged as such and recognized as such, like Naked Lunch. Well, that's heroin, but you know, so it's a little different. But when you're presenting your garbage ideas and stupid bullshit nonsense is like this academic paper and everything has a fucking citation and you expect everyone to take it seriously, it's like, you know, this is my master's thesis, I'm at Oxford and shit. That's just really pretentious and stupid. And the only philosophers that Nick Land quotes or references are all male, white, European guys. Schopenhauer, Kant. He doesn't go to like, you know, Confucius or anything. It's all just Plato. So it's like Nick Land obviously does not have as wide an exposure to the world as he thinks he does. He just consumes science fiction movies, books like Neuromancer. And this is back in the 90s. So a nerd like this thinks, wow, I've read Neuromancer. My exposure to the world is complete. And this is the same type of guy that Elon Musk is, and Peter Thiel, and Mencius Moldbug. Again, fucking impotent, white, insecure males. It's pathetic. I can't say it enough. Read Fanged Noumena if you want to understand male insecurity in the 21st century. This is the most misogynist excerpt here. Woman is wicked art, art that intensifies life, art whose only truth is a whispered intimation that negation, too, is only a dream, the figment of an overflowing positivity that deceives through excess. Could the dream of redemption be nothing but a bangle upon the arms of exuberant life? Only the male intellect, clouded by the sexual impulse, could call the undersized, narrow-shouldered, broad-hipped, and short-legged sex the fair sex, for in this impulse is to be found its whole beauty. The female sex could more aptly be called the unaesthetic. Women are so terribly non-platonic, so outrageously vital and real, so excessive in relation to the cold, sterile perfections of the ideas. With infallible instinctive power, they propagate the dangerous delusion that there is something about life that we want. Pessimism has to be misogyny, because woman refuses to repel. Woman is matter, formless and unpresentable, arousing and thus tormenting. Everything about her is pretense, deception, alteration, unrealizable irrational attraction. Schopenhauer's notorious essay on woman is mapped by the movement of this word, as it organizes the play of seduction, of indirect action, of non-ideal beauty. Woman is matter, formless and unpresentable, arousing and thus tormenting. Everything about her is pretense, deception. Oh, I guess I copied the same quote twice. Why did I do that? Well, you get the idea. It's just misogyny, and Nick Land thinks of women as these, like, ideals that are, like, abstract and shit. No, they seduce me, and then they won't fuck me, damn it. And this is Nick Land's entire fucking life, and he can't seem to think of women as just people, because he's a lust-driven fuck beast. And he probably really enjoys getting his dick out, getting intercourse going. I can't relate to this, obviously, as an asexual. I think this kind of idea is, it's just stupid as fuck. But it's a great example of how horned up and simultaneously impotent fascists generally are, They just can't have sex. So Nick Land has to get on meth, and he has to write out this 150,000 word screed that nobody gives a shit about. Yeah, it's pretty sad. It really says something about the fact that we exist in a patriarchal society. That someone like Valerie Solanas, who's every bit as insane as Nick Land, like, they're both crazy, don't get me wrong, but someone like Valerie Solanas, we only tend to talk about her in her Scum Manifesto in terms of, this stupid broad, this stupid prostitute, this dumb whore, her and her stupid fucking ideas where she talks about how shitty men are and how great women are. But then we think of Nick Land in a book like Fanged Noumena, or I certainly don't, but many, many influential and powerful people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and Mencius Moldbug do. We think of Fanged Noumena, and we go, wow, Nick Land is this misunderstood genius, this brilliant visionary. And he goes to college, and he's white, and he's a man, and he's British, so he must be right about everything. We look at someone like Valerie Solanas, and we just go, oh, she's insane. But Nick Land, he's a schizophrenic visionary, right? So this dichotomy between, the fascists like Curtis Yarvin and whatever, they'll call someone like Valerie Solanas, they'll just dismiss her ideas, but then Nick Land, they prop him up. Even though they're both batshit cuckoo, walls to the max, it's like to the same extent, just one's a woman and one's a man. So the way we treat and interpret these texts says a lot about what our society inherently values, because we give someone like Nick Land so much fucking benefit of the doubt, which is wild to me, but it really says a lot. Nick Land is what happens when you just give a bunch of meth to someone at college. The book ends, or it doesn't end with this, but one of the last essays is not really an essay, it's more like a short story, and it's called The Origin of the Cthulhu Club. And Nick Land just writes this shitty fan fiction about H.P. Lovecraft. All these fucking racists and fascists, they just love H.P. Lovecraft. He's their favorite sci-fi horror writer. They have no exposure to anyone else. They don't read The Female Man. They don't read a sci-fi book like that that's written by a woman and about the female perspective and is actually interesting. They don't read any Afrofuturism. They just read H.P. Lovecraft. And they're fascinated by the idea of Cthulhu, who's this bastardization, essentially, of just like, Hindu and Aztec gods from the perspective of this sheltered little New England white-ass Christian bitch boy, who obviously is as insecure, withdrawn, psychologically impotent as someone like Nick Land. So, of course, they all gravitate towards and look up to H.P. Lovecraft. He's their favorite fucking writer. But you will never, ever hear one of these little bitch babies talking about how beautiful a book like Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury is, how reading about Douglas Spalding's incredible Summer in Greentown gives their life meaning. They just love Cthulhu. They don't read Ray Bradbury. They don't think about Ray Bradbury. They don't think about what Ray Bradbury has to say. They just like H.P. Lovecraft. He's their favorite writer. He's their favorite fucking guy. He's their go-to guy. He's the only guy that they ever fucking read, and the only guy that they ever fucking mention, because they're functionally illiterate. But they're at college, so they know Kant and Schopenhauer and Plato, and they're able to repackage it and redigest it. And then they're able to say, well, philosophy is conducive to fascism if you overthink things too much, and you just end up in this meth circle of, circle-jerking bullshit. But I'm going to do it anyway because I'm a little teehee bullshit boy bastard like that. But yeah, insincerity, detached irony, apathy, all the things I would expect from a shitty 21st century fascist like Nick Land, here in Fanged Noumena. Now, would I recommend reading Fanged Noumena? The answer may surprise you. I would say yes. If you want to actually understand fascism, in the same way I'd recommend that you read Mein Kampf at least once if you want to understand how fascism works, and if you want to understand how modern, contemporary fascism works, then read Fanged Noumena. Some parts of it are completely incomprehensible because Nick Land, again, was just on meth the entire time he was writing this. He was coked up out of his fucking mind. Or, methed out of his goddamn mind. Probably both at once. I would recommend this if you want to understand comprehensively how fascism works, how it takes root. I would not recommend reading this and going and expecting any ideas of value, anything coherent, anything worth taking away. It's a sad, cold, pessimistic, disgusting look at a disgusting man. But would I say you should read it? Yes. Because fascists don't actually want you to read their literature. They want you to look up at it with reverence and awe. They want you to go, wow, Nick Land, he has these credentials. He must be really intelligent. But if you actually bother to look at it and just fucking read it, you'll take 3 seconds and you'll be like, oh, Nick Land, he's fucking stupid. This Hitler guy, this guy's a fucking idiot. I'm supposed to take this fucking guy seriously? So the more you think critically about fascist media, the more you recognize it, are able to identify it, and then discredit it, and dismiss it, and move the fuck on with your fucking life, the easier things will be for you. You need to be able to recognize the patterns of your enemy in effect. There are all too many leftists who fall for the idea that leftism is all about being nice and getting along. Progressivism is just about, you gotta just be nice, and you gotta block out the ideas you don't like. But sometimes you have to confront the ideas that affect the world in a negative way, and you need to say why they're wrong. You need to think about why they're wrong. Think critically about why they're wrong. Am I of the mind that a book like Fanged Noumena should be burned? No, I think psychiatrists should study it as an example of male insecurity. I think people should recognize Nick Land as the sorry little piece of shit cockroach dipshit he is. They shouldn't give him any credit. They shouldn't recognize him as influential or meaningful in any capacity. This guy's a fucking moron. And we should absolutely mock and belittle and diminish the impact of Fanged Noumena and books like it as much as possible because they are fucking stupid. But should we burn it? No. Burning books is for losers. Only shitheads like Sam Altman, Dario Modi, those type, they burn books. Burning books is for fucking losers. Burning books is for people who are incapable of coming to terms with and reckoning with the implications of the modern world and thinking critically about the world in which they find themselves. And we don't need to do that. We don't need to burn books. But at the same time, I can make a comic like Sapo versus Fascism with this little caricature of Nick Land here, and it's fucking hilarious. And I just make Nick Land look like a derpy little schleb, like he actually is, and suddenly all the big mystery and the big obfuscatory bullshit hype is torn away. He's not the big Wizard of Oz head anymore. And you just knock him down to size. You just take him down a peg. You just say, look, Nick Land, this guy's fucking stupid, and his ideas are fucking stupid, and his book is crap. Yeah, that's Fanged Noumena. I read so you don't have to. Again, if you're not impressionable and you can wade through 400 fucking pages of bullshit, then by all means go ahead. And I wouldn't presume to stop you. But this book is fucking stupid. And I recommend something like The Exegesis of Philip K. Dick instead. There's an actual book recommendation from an actual cyberpunk writer who was popular and published during his own lifetime, and people give a shit about because he was a smart fucking guy. The Exegesis of Philip K. Dick, if you want to actually learn something and have some really cool ideas bestowed onto you. That's my recommendation. Can't recommend the exegesis of Philip K. Dick enough. Fanged Noumena, this piece of shit. Fuck it. Die, Nick Land. Yeah. See, I'm edipally devouring the carcass of Nick Land here. Oh, die, bitch. Okay, well that's today's video. Fuck fascists and fuck Nick Land and fuck Nick Fuentes. Why some of these fucking fascists named Nick? Where's all the Nicks on the left wing? Well, anyway, but yeah, tastes like shit. Anyway, catch you in the next one, I guess. My head hurts from so much Nick Land. He's so fucking stupid. What a fucking idiot. Nick Land.